said in one of our last sessions that you kind of felt like you've turned a corner.
Yeah, I think a lot of it was I didn't wake up in pain, and it was kind of an all of a sudden thing because I just one day thought, well, it didn't hurt. Other people I've talked to said, oh, you just got to go sit on the couch. You got to lay in bed. You can't do anything. And all my surgeon and Becky recommendations were to get up and move and do things. And if I shorten my healing by a year, that's huge for me.
Oh, yeah.
They said, well, so seriously, do you think physical therapy is worth it? And I said, I wouldn't be here walking around if it wasn't. I think I was a little skeptical of, God, that's a lot of time and a lot of financial requirement for stretching,
right,
or whatever. It was more than that. It was which muscle group to use to help balance this pain or that inability to reach a new target. I can honestly say not everything we did here was fun.
Right. Yeah, and I don't think that's ever our slogan. Hey everybody, it's Becky Pearson, and I'm here talking to Bradley Bradley Sue, however you know him. We're here to talk about what he's went through over the last 8 months.
8, 9, something like that.
Yeah. So, Brad, do you want to talk about what happened on April
6th of 22? I was roping and had an accident where at the end of the run the horse had bucked, and I wound up on the horn twice, split my pelvis, and it actually opened. Then it detached soft tissue, muscle, tendons, ligaments from the pelvic floor, tore some stomach muscles. So I had a surgery to plate my pelvis and a screw. Becky might know the explanation better, but it went through the upper parts of my pelvis to hold me together.
In the back, screw that went through your SI joints, basically.
Yes.
Yep.
I wore that till August, and the plate is hopefully permanent.
You don't want to go in and get it out.
Right.
Yeah. So tell me what life, I mean, it was pretty miserable, obviously, going to the hospital.
Correct. I was unable to walk when this happened, yet I didn't call an ambulance. So we had quite the event to get started. But
stubborn cowboy stuff.
Extremely high pain level with an inability for mobility, I guess, was the biggest thing. And so I got to the hospital, and they waited 3 days for surgery to let swelling go down. Some of the things they explained to me was medical terms that they like to wait a few days.
Right.
But after that, then I had to start relearning how to get out of bed, how to walk, how to do everything.
Yeah. So they got you out of bed.
The day after surgery, I walked halfway around the bed and got back in.
Yeah.
The next day, I walked to the door, and the next day to the nurse's station. And then I was moved to an in-house rehab center for a week in Good Sam.
Right.
And that was therapy twice a day for 7 days.
Okay. Pretty much living on pain meds to the max.
For as long as I could. I know I got off the narcotic pain meds so I could go back to work. But I was on 16-ish ibuprofen a day.
Wow. Yeah.
Maybe the max recommended plus some.
Yeah. So.
And that was for months.
Right. Because you were able to do a little more therapy, but you had to walk with crutches for 8 weeks?
Probably, or longer.
Yeah.
It was June or July.
Okay.
June, I think, when they let me stop walking with crutches.
Okay. And so then you could walk without crutches, but you still had to be careful with...
Walking was my only
form
thing that they would let me do. And that was a very slow, meandering walk with intense pain usually. It was getting better by August, and then I had to have another surgery to remove the screw.
Yep.
And then the pain started again because things started to move and loosen up. And, and they expected more out of me. And so I think it was, in all honesty, after that surgery, I felt like I went backwards for a month or two. And I think it's just been recently, about November, to when I don't remember waking up in pain.
Yeah. So that's kind of why we wanted to talk to you about, like, there are a lot of people out there that are in chronic pain and pain every day. And yours obviously was created by an accident, a trauma, and a lot of people's chronic pain does start that way. But I have to give you a lot of credit for sticking with what the doctor has told you, because you don't really like to exercise.
No. I was asked one time about which forms of exercise I liked, and I said, well, probably when it's over, because I've never really started in my life, and I don't know why you would. That's just kind of the attitude I had. I think my exercise was basically my daily activities of working with the horses and the livestock around the house. But when you get confined to do nothing, the exercise, that's a whole nother level of rehab that I had to start.
Right. Yeah. And, you know, we had a lot of heart-to-heart moments during therapy of, you know, because of the amount of pain that you were in.
Yeah.
There were moments where, when we talk about like the nerve pain that you had that came after they removed.
No, that was first.
That was
first. I even wound up at the ER probably a month after I got home, because I could not take the pain anymore. That was when I was off the narcotics, and the Advil or ibuprofen could not keep up.
Right.
Along with some nerve pain medicine. It was an excruciating pain.
Yeah. So things that we did for that, therapy-wise, one of your favorite things for us to do, that's very sarcastic, we did some dry needling because the muscles of your hip were so tight, and they were clamping down on the sciatic nerve. And so we did some dry needling to the hip, which did give you some relief from the nerve pain, along with stretching and things like that. But it wasn't your favorite thing to do.
Well, I was so tired of being sore that intensified the pain in one specific area after 3 times in a week. And I just needed a break, but we did go back and do it again later as I noticed some of the relief wasn't coming from normal stretching.
Right. Yep. And that is the nice thing about dry needling, is that the mechanism of how that works is that when the needle pierces the muscle, it starts a cascade of chemical reaction in the muscle that allows for the muscle to relax and blood flow to get to the muscle. Where, like, those deep muscles of the hip, you know, as much as I try to get in there and dig, and you think that I'm really being...
I was sure that you were getting all the way to the bone at times.
But I still can't quite get to some of those deep muscles in there. And so it can be just another avenue to help with.
And I wouldn't say the dry needling was terrible in any way. I had just hit a limit of how much I could take day and day and day and day after each other.
Right.
And I just did not want like my 6th treatment or something back to back. I just needed to let that area relax. But at the time, it's not a painful procedure.
Right.
It's no more irritating than a deep massage, I wouldn't say.
Oh, no, come on, now be honest.
At the time, it is not. But for me, I didn't have pain relief overnight or over the next day, and that specific small area was getting sore from repeated needling. Yeah. Now be honest about what you told a friend of ours at a party, what you'd rather have done to you. I may have exaggerated some, but it is not something you look forward to when you wake up in the morning. Yeah. But after I took a break for more than a month, I was kind of ready to do it again one time. Becky kind of talked me into it, but we were working on some range of motion that we were able to get to after we did dry needling again after a break. Yeah. So it accomplished the goal. I didn't look forward to it. I think the first time I thought, well, this looks like acupuncture. I've always wondered what that was like, and it was different. It's not pain free for sure, it's not totally pain free. Right. I saw some results from it that you probably had to think about later to see was it worth it at times. But I can honestly say not everything we did here was fun. Right. Yeah, and I don't think that's ever our slogan.
you know, we want to get you back to doing the things
Right.
that you want to do. And so as we moved forward and progressed, so we did 2 different rounds basically of physical therapy. One immediately while you still had your hardware still in there.
Correct.
And then actually we've done 3 rounds.
We've done 3 12 session.
Yep. And so then we did another session after the hardware was removed.
Right.
That was probably the most difficult session,
Right.
would you say?
Yep.
Yeah. And then you took another break, and then we did another session or another set of sessions, fine-tuning things, because you got to where you were doing pretty much everything you wanted to. You even had you gotten back on the horse yet? Okay.
Yes.
But you noticed when you were walking with boots, you could hear a difference from one side.
Yes, I could hear one leg slapping the floor instead of placing on the floor, I would say.
Yep, so we fine-tuned things again. And, you know, I really feel like in the last part of it, Brad, that you really, I noticed a big change in your self-motivation, like, because you have really, you started working out at the gym.
Yep.
And you'd never done that before in your life.
Nope.
Yep. And you've kind of, you said in one of our last sessions that you kind of felt like you've turned a corner.
Yeah, I think a lot of it was I didn't wake up in pain, and it was kind of an all of a sudden thing because I just one day thought, well, it didn't hurt, and you know, I was confined to limited mobility. I'd gained some weight, and I wanted to lose the weight, and I rode a horse, and I could see some places where I needed to work on a few things, so I could do that, and so you know, my therapy was 3 days a week here, but it was 7 days a week because I worked out at home too.
Yep.
And continued with our therapy sessions through the same exercises the 4 days I was not here.
Yep, yep. And you, when you think about like days that you've taken off, you know, for I think like over, you had was it Thanksgiving you were sick and
you traveled a little.
You traveled, and so when you didn't exercise, then tell me what you felt like.
My injury creates a stiffness when I quit stretching, and even if I don't maybe get on an elliptical or walk on a treadmill, I have certain stretches that if I don't do, it's almost like tying your shoes is hard the next day or something. I don't know if I go backwards or if I just get tight in those areas and I have to work extra hard the second day after I don't do something.
Yeah.
So
do you notice, other than the tightness, do you notice more pain in general, just all over, or
it's more of a just general, I feel myself getting stiffer. And I don't think it hurts because, well, the stiffer it gets, the less you do. So you don't do anything, but it does take a little longer to work it out if you take 2 days off or relax too much. Even if you only get through half of them because you're on the road and you get somewhere, there's a couple key stretches I have to do to really allow me to wake up and feel more limber than I would otherwise.
Right. So when this initially happened, and I know you had a flood of calls and text messages, and a lot of guys that this had happened to them before, and the things that they told you it was going to be like, and things that you've experienced. What would you say?
I would say I had one of those guys see me walking in June and said, "Oh, you didn't get hurt as bad as I did," because I was out walking. I mean, I had crutches. I was slow. It was very hard. 2 things have helped with that. I mean, one, medical technology continues to change, and I believe the way that they fastened me together with the temporary hardware really helped a lot to get the first round. But at that point in time, I'd been through the therapy at the hospital and a session of therapy here. So I was 5 weeks in of physical therapy and had exercises I'd been doing since April. So I was April, May, June. I was 90 plus days in of daily ritual.
Yeah.
And so for someone to say, well, you must not have been hurt as bad as I was because I was still laid up then, well, I don't know what their therapy session was, and this was 20 years ago for them, but other people I've talked to said oh, you just got to go sit on the couch. You got to lay in bed. You can't do anything. And all my surgeon and Becky recommendations were to get up and move and do things. And if I shorten my healing by a year, that's huge for me.
Oh, yeah.
And, you know, we're, like we said, 8 or 9 months in, I'm pain-free. I'm not home-free.
Right. And as we've talked before, you know, like motion is lotion. You are going to have to keep that up. Even myself at almost 50 years old, I have to exercise every day. And when you've had an injury like yourself, then I think that just brings that to the forefront even more.
That's what I was afraid of, because I'm also close to the same age. And it's changed from when I was 20 and 30, when you could do anything you wanted and there was no consequence the next day. And now everything's harder.
Yeah.
I mean, every cake we eat is harder to get rid of, and every time we get hurt, it takes a little longer to get stretched out or healed, or everything is just, our bodies are wearing out.
Yeah. So you also had made a comment to me that somebody asked you, isn't physical therapy a joke? Or is it for real? Or
yes, I was at a party one day and someone was going to have a joint replaced, and they said, well, so seriously, do you think physical therapy is worth it? And I said, I wouldn't be here walking around if it wasn't. I was probably, at one point in my life, not probably, I think I was a little skeptical of, God, that's a lot of time and a lot of financial requirement for stretching.
Right.
Or whatever. It was more than that. It was which muscle group to use to help balance this pain or that inability to reach a new target with mobility or something. And it was kind of interesting to hear somebody ask me that was having that major of a surgery, and I just absolutely said, you have to go, because...
Why would you go through the surgery and the pain?
Right. Because you're not going to be any different if you do nothing.
Yeah.
And I do believe in that wholeheartedly. That's not just helping you with an ad. This is really, it's unbelievable to me how far I came. I would say I'd go leaps and bounds for a month and then sit stagnant for 6 weeks, and then leaps and bounds, and then stagnant or backwards even after August we went backwards. But to be where I'm at today, I think, is due to 40-some sessions plus every day in between, continuing the same process.
Well, and to think if you would have had to put yourself through what you needed to go through to get
I would have done it.
Yeah. I don't think any of us have the fortitude to just make ourselves do that because of the amount of pain that you...
Yes.
I mean, I've seen it in your face. I've seen it in your groans and moans. And, you know, I mean, that's why we as physical therapists are here, to help, encourage you, be your cheerleader, to say, yeah, you can give me one more rep. You know, you can, let's try this, you know. And,
or some of the manual stretch where I would not push myself to try to put my knee behind my ear. You would, you try. But to say that, it's to find a new limit to your stretch. You could push or pull or do something where I would have quit on my own. And sometimes we had to get to that next piece so that I could do it on my own the next 8 weeks.
Yeah. You know, like I said, hats off to you, Brad, because I know it has not been an easy journey at all.
No.
And and you have really done what you've needed to do to get back there. And that's one thing we talked about when you first came in is, you know, I told you, I said, Brad, I don't want you to not get back on a horse because you physically can't. If you don't want to get back on a horse, I want it to be because you don't want to get back on a horse.
Right. And that was such a good way of saying it, is you're not going to be limited by physical ability. You're going to be limited by choice. Right. But the other thing is, I had to choose to work this hard at home too.
Absolutely.
And I had some goals and some targets I wanted to reach, and we talked about, and we honestly believed that as we got farther along, the pain would get less, because that was a big thing for me. I have felt good for almost every day of my life up until that point. And then to have the chronic pain was probably my number one fear, is am I going to live in pain for a long time? Because, I mean, the pain pills were not helping, and sometimes you would turn to other alternatives, and I can understand how and why, but I didn't want to be trapped that way.
Right.
And so to look at how do you move forward, it took a lot of work from us to come in. The 3 days a week was minor. It was the 4 days a week she wasn't there telling me to do it, that I had to get up and do it, that it was important. I mean, we're 9 times 7. How many days are we in? It's not 12 sessions. It's not 4 weeks, 3 times a week. It's every day.
Right. Yep. Yeah.
And that was the hardest thing to get my head wrapped around is this is my new norm.
Yeah.
I have to take a certain block of time every day and do something I don't want to do that's going to hurt worse than doing nothing.
Yes.
But if it hurts worse today, it might hurt less tomorrow.
Yes. Yeah.
That's a backwards way for my mind to think because it was not fun.
Right. A different way of thinking than you've ever thought before.
Yeah. Why would you intentionally do this to yourself so that you're better later? Because later didn't mean tomorrow or next week. It meant next month or it was so far down the road you didn't see instant results. That's hard for Brad too.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I'm an instant gratification kind of person by nature, and I want to see results just as fast with everything I do.
Right.
And I would say we'd go weeks without seeing hardly any progress in my mind. And I think Becky could see us doing something a little better or a little stronger. And then one day, well, that was easier.
Right.
And that was kind of our cheer day.
Yeah, yeah. And we tried to measure. We tried to measure as much. One of the things we did was, can you reach your toes? I think you told me when you first started.
I've never done that.
Yeah. And guess what he can do now? He can reach his toes. But looking at some of those little milestones, one of the last things we were doing is how much can you rotate your hips, and we measure him where he started every morning before PT, and then at the end of that session, and how much did we gain. And I think that's important to celebrate those little...
2 degrees.
Yes, exactly.
Or you only went backwards 4.
Yes, instead of
because
10 like you did last
you
time.
will in between visits go backwards, even if you work out at home.
Yep.
Just because there's certain things I couldn't do on my own.
Yep, absolutely. Anything else that you can think of, like, to anybody that's kind of like, I'm afraid PT's going to hurt, or I just don't know if that's... I mean, we already kind of talked about that, if they really feel like it's necessary, but...
To me, it depends on what your goals are in life, and one of my goals was to not feel like I couldn't do the things I wanted to do. And so I'd talk to Becky, we'd set some goals early, like we talked about, and after about September, early October, I was done, and I came back because I wasn't where I felt like I needed. And it's funny how we came far enough along that last little push really showed us some things, and we gained a lot in some flexibility in my hips, which is very important for living.
Right.
Just getting in and out of a car was hard, and I've got more mobility in my hips now, and it's kind of like, why don't you want to feel good? And if it takes a time commitment of an hour 3 times a week here and an hour at home, or a small financial commitment for a 8-week session or 12-week session, what's that worth over the course of 20 years?
Right.
Of feeling like you're able to do what you want to do, whether it's a sport or a recreation activity or just playing with kids or grandkids
or not being grumpy to your spouse.
Well, sometimes you got to do that anyway.
But what I'm saying, when you're in pain, sometimes you just want to rip somebody's head off.
I may have been told that I'm not the easiest patient when I'm having bad days. It affects you mentally.
Yeah.
Over time, I can't physically take.
Right.
Just constant pain.
Yeah. And that's the thing, like, people get caught in that, and so they do turn to either more alcohol use or food or whatever to try to make them feel better in that short term, but really in the long term they're just creating more problems,
Oh, definitely. And I could see where it would be easy to go down that path because that's the easy button.
Yeah. Yep.
And, hitting the easy button is what everybody wants.
Absolutely.
I think I said to you one day when we were here, well, God, I put on all this weight while I've been hurt. So is there a pill you can take that makes you lose it? Because the magic pill, there is magic pills that make pain go away. And they're not always the healthy alternative to what's going on, because I think once you turn to that route, you will create other problems, but in turn, you are not addressing the reason.
Right.
And sometimes it's not that hard to find the reason.
Right.
And they're fixable. Most things going on with our external part of our body is fixable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it takes the internal, our brain.
Oh, that's the hardest part.
Exactly, wrapping our head around, okay, this is what I need to do to get out of this. And, sometimes are we ever going to completely make you feel like you did when you were 20 years old? Probably not. But if we can help you feel 10 times better than you did when you walked in here, we probably can do that.
I think my surgeon said it best. He said, well, where you're at is where you're at. Because I'm pretty good, but I'm not as good as the original maker. And that's part of it is our bodies do wear out and not everything's going to feel like we want it to. Like you said, when we're 18 and we can go through anything and come out the other side great.
Right.
Well, at least maybe we just don't hurt if we play a round of golf or
right.
Go up the stairs to do laundry.
Yeah, exactly. Well, thank you, Brad. I really appreciate it. And,
yeah, it's been quite a road.